had the pleasure of hearing Jennifer Lerner speak at a President's Summit this past summer, and it is my honor to introduce her here today. Jennifer joined the Education Advisory Board, known as EAB, in 2021 as the Senior Director for Professional and Adult Education Forum. She leads research and services, including customized market insights reports for partners interested in the areas of continuing, professional, online, and adult education. Prior to EAB, Jennifer was Associate Vice President for e-learning at Northern Virginia Community College. Her specialties include community colleges, faculty development, and online learning. Please help me welcome Dr. Jennifer Lerner.
Thank you so much, Janice. It is wonderful to be with you all today. I'm going to pull up my slides while I say hello. It was great to hear everyone's excitement to talk to each other. I spent the early part of my career as a community college faculty member myself, so I well remember the feeling of coming back this first week and also sitting in great presentations while also in the back of your mind thinking about all the rest that you have to do on your syllabi. So I hope that what I can bring you today, even while you have all those other things in mind, is some helpful ways of thinking about AI and what that looks like in your classroom this year and in the coming years, with a particular focus on what it means for your students and the jobs and careers you're preparing them for. So I want to focus on three key areas today. First, why AI education is necessary for our students right now, what is happening in the jobs that they are about to take that make it imperative that we address this in our classrooms and in the classroom far beyond computer science. Secondly, I want to talk about the fact that one reason we need to engage AI in our classrooms is because students, as you probably well know, are already using it themselves. So we don't really have a choice but to engage it as well. And then finally, I want to share some resources, tools, and examples that might make it easier for you to take this on. I know that you all have very full plates, and it can be overwhelming and challenging to take on something as big as AI. There's lots to learn and try and do, but hopefully these tools can give you some easy ways to get started and try some things. But let's begin with how AI is changing both academia and the world of work. And then we'll address some of those examples and tools and ways that this might look in your classroom. So, of course, we have to begin with the issue of cheating. I am sure that as with any faculty gathering, there are lots of different opinions in the room on how we feel about AI, how concerned we are about what students are doing with it. And I'm sure there's a significant portion of you very concerned about how students are using it to cheat. And we see throughout the higher education press, lots of discussion about this cheating, what it means for education, for the level of just human cognition and human skill going forward if we continue to have students use AI in a very robust way to replace their own thought work. And this is a very valid concern that we need to address. That said, we can't simply ask students to stop using this tool because they need this tool for the jobs they are about to take, and for many of your students, the jobs they are already in. This graphic tracks job postings across the last couple of years that ask the candidate to have generative AI skills of some type. So you can see in the dark blue line, all job postings, and then for comparison in the teal line, job postings that ask for generative AI skills. So as you can see with that vertical dotted line, the release of ChatGPT, that's the release of ChatGPT 3 when it was publicly available for the first time. Right after that release, you see this massive increase in the number of job postings asking the candidate to have Gen AI skills. If you're wondering about that downturn in Q4 of 2023, that was a broad tech sector downturn, so that doesn't reflect anything specific about AI. So as you can see, this tool came out, employers immediately got really excited about what it could do for them. And we saw a spike, and job postings have never gone back down. We consistently see this increase. Now, you would be right to point out that when you start at a very low number of postings, the percentage increase can be a little bit misleading. So you can see on the bottom left here, a 644% increase in the number of job postings asking for AI skills. That is certainly overstated because of the way percentages work when they're off a small number. But for comparison, if you look at the two numbers in orange on the right, some of the other emerging fields across the past few years where we saw huge spikes in demand, fintech and smart manufacturing, had not nearly the level or rate of growth compared to Gen AI. So something's happening. Employers are asking for these skills. Now, it's worth noting that employers, for the most part, really don't know what they're doing in this space yet. They're asking for skills in a very broad and general way, and they don't quite know yet how they're using the tool in most cases. But nonetheless, our students, as we send them out into the world to apply for these jobs, need to have some basic competencies in this space and understand the terminology, know how to learn these tools, know how to talk to employers about them, or they're not going to be selected for these roles. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this applies to computer science students, students in technical fields, but I teach English or I teach sociology, and so this is not applicable to me and the jobs my students are going to be applying for. But in fact, what's interesting is the ways in which AI is affecting jobs across nearly every sector. So on this slide, we've separated jobs or responsibilities into some buckets and ways that they would use AI. So you can see that top 5%, that's workers who are going to be actually building AI, developing the tools that AI is based on, large language models, et cetera. Those are your computer science students. You're already teaching them those skills. That's how we have AI in the first place. So they don't need a lot of change. They obviously need to keep learning all the new information, but they're relatively well taken care of by the curriculum already. But importantly, that's only 5% of workers, if you look at the workforce overall, that need that advanced level of understanding of AI, which means the other 95% are folks in all the other fields combined doing other sorts of work with AI. So we need to think in some different ways. Teaching our students AI for most of our students is not about teaching them technical skills. It's about teaching them to understand what AI is, what it can and cannot do, and how it might be implemented into their type of work. So let's dig into that a little bit further. Oftentimes, when we talk about AI and the workforce, the immediate implication or our assumption is that we're talking about work being automated and people losing their jobs as a result. And that is certainly part of the picture. And it is part of the picture that particularly affects community college graduates because it affects entry-level work that we are often sending our students out into the world to do. That said, there's a whole nother piece of the way that AI affects work, and that is what we typically call augmentation. Augmentation means AI is not doing the work for you, taking the work off your plate, but what it is doing is giving you new ways of doing your work. It's augmenting how you approach your tasks. So we've given you a couple of examples on this slide using some World Economic Forum data to explain how certain jobs might be affected by this mix of automation and augmentation. So let's take the role of a data scientist, for example. Based on the World Economic Forum's analysis of the tasks a data scientist does, they estimate that about 35% of that work will be able to be automated away in the near future. Basic data analysis, basic visualizations, those kind of things. About 55% of the role will be able to be augmented, meaning that employee will be able to do their work better and faster by using AI tools in their work process. And then about 10% of the role isn't going to be affected by AI at all. It is, human work. It's giving a presentation. It's scanning literature and putting together recommendations for a client, those kind of things. let's contrast that with the case of a healthcare administrator. Based on this data, the World Economic Forum estimates about 20% of the job of a healthcare administrator could probably be automated in the near future. That might be scheduling appointments, reviewing case files to come up with a draft treatment regimen, those sorts of things. Augmentation, about 30%. And then about half the role is not going to be affected by AI at all. These are human tasks, working with patients, supervising nurses, etc. So as you can see, each different role based on the tasks that an employee needs to do will have a different mix of ways in which AI affects it. Different roles have more or less of the work that can be entirely automated away and replaced by other things. And different proportions of the role that are augmented, where you're going to be asked to do your work in a new and different way using AI tools to make you better. And each role has different proportions of the work that are really just human tasks that there's no indication AI will be able to replace nor really assist with. So this gives us a complicated reality, depending on which types of roles and jobs we're preparing our students for, to try to grapple with. But I want to make this a little bit more concrete. This slide gives you a comparison of, on the left, what a day in the life of a financial analyst would look like before AI, and then what it might look like based on the types of changes we just talked about after AI. So on the left, a financial analyst is conducting themselves in a job that is primarily solo work, analyzing data, spending the day in their spreadsheets, tweaking the formulas, checking for data errors, fixing data errors, bringing it to their manager, getting more feedback, going back to the spreadsheet and making more changes. It's a solo job, and your curriculum preparing a student for that job is primarily going to be focused on the tools and techniques of data analysis and getting really good at the software you use in the ways of thinking about how to analyze data well. Post AI, if you look on the right, all of that work can be conducted by AI through both a combination of automation and augmentation in just a couple hours of that worker's day. They're going to be interacting with the data. They're going to be checking over AI's work, tweaking, etc. But it's only going to be a small portion of that day compared to their whole day before AI. And that means a big chunk of their day is now open for all sorts of other kinds of things. Maybe they're now responsible for reviewing the news, market listening, keeping their firm informed about trends to be aware of. Maybe they need to meet with clients now. Maybe they are developing insights and takeaways based on the data instead of just formatting the data. And maybe they're expected now to present these findings and advice to stakeholders, internal or external. So if you think about how that job has changed, it first of all is probably now more like a second level job. It's not entry level. It's something that in the past, maybe someone would have been promoted into once they got good at the individual contributor tasks of data analysis. It also probably is mostly focused on skills that your current curriculum isn't teaching. If you were trying to train someone to be today's financial analyst and teaching them to be great at software packages and understanding data, you're probably not spending a lot of time teaching them to be a public speaker, to understand how to work with clients, to conduct effective market listening in their industry, any of those sorts of things. So this shift begins to mean that we have to think differently about the types of skills we're embedding in our programs to prepare students appropriately for the jobs that they're about to head into. Now, I would also add to this and reiterate what I said earlier, that there's really no job that's not going to be affected in some way. Now, this, of course, gives us all a mental challenge. Can I think of this one outlier job that's definitely not going to be affected? And maybe we can. But virtually every job is going to be affected in some way. And again, some more than others, some more automated, some more augmented, but every job is going to be affected somehow. The data on this graphic divides jobs by income decile. So the jobs on the left are the lowest earning jobs, jobs on the right, highest earning. And you can look at the color coding and see how different decile jobs breakdown between, we have them labeled here as low and high performance, but you can think of this also as automation and augmentation. So the teal is regular routine tasks that can be automated away. And the dark blue is role tasks that are able to be augmented by AI. So what's interesting, again, we tend to think about the impact of AI as automating away jobs. And you can see in that box on the right, it is the case that a low-income worker is 14 times more likely to lose their job as a result of implementation of AI than a high-income worker. So that is certainly a concern and an issue we need to address. But high-income jobs are being transformed as well. So if you look at the graphic, the top impacted decile is the third decile. And as you can see, a huge proportion of the work of workers in that area, which is probably your entry-level office worker, many of the jobs you are preparing associates, graduates for, that's the most impacted area. But the second most impacted decile here is the top earning decile. Now, most of that work is going to be augmented, not automated. But it's quite interesting to think about the fact that it is our highest earners that are the next most affected by needing to learn and apply AI in the workplace. And that every one of these deciles is going to be impacted. That means some opportunities for us, especially at the community college. We are going to have lots of workers displaced by automation in that third and fourth decile who need to come back to us to reskill and or skill for a new field that is less impacted by AI. We also are going to have folks in the higher earning brackets who just need to come to us for basic AI skills. Maybe they're coming to your non-credit programs, maybe they're coming to a credit program, but they need to rethink and build up some new skills and competencies for this new world where they are going to be expected every day to use these tools to speed up their work or do their work differently. So if we think about what it means to teach AI, again, we're not talking about the technical aspect of AI that your computer science students are learning. We're talking about that other 95% of workers, what they might need to know about AI. The first step of that is understanding what it would mean to be AI literate. We all have our definitions as educators about general types of literacy and even things like quantitative literacy. Well, what does AI literacy specifically mean? I'm not going to go into all the details here. You'll have these slides and follow up as a reference if this is useful. But in general, we need students to understand what AI is, meaning what is it built from? What kind of program is this? In what ways do I need to understand how it comes to its conclusions so that I can properly interpret those conclusions? And then relatedly, what can it do? How might I use it? What are the types of tasks that it is applicable to that it might be able to actually help me with? And what should I not ask it to do? How do I prompt it and improve my prompts over time to get the best results? How do I know when AI is wrong? How do I catch when it is hallucinating, making things up that I should not trust? And how do I catch the biases that are built into these tools? What do I need to know about AI safety in terms of sharing private data and those sorts of things? And how can I tell if AI has been used? Which, of course, is a very key question for many of you in the room, I'm sure. So all of these things are things our students need to leave our institution knowing and understanding, and therefore things that all faculty need to know as well to be able to teach it and to be able to grapple with your own use of these tools in your work. So one place many institutions go as they think about how am I going to teach students about AI is they think, well, I'm going to make a degree in AI. And we hear this at all levels, masters, bachelor's, associates. We're going to make a degree in AI. So one question we like to ask folks as you think about that is to put yourself back to the year 2000. We had the internet emerging. We had Ask Jeeves. We were very excited. We were told it was going to change everything. And it sort of has. I think that's probably pretty valid. But at the time, you might have said, hey, let's make a degree in the internet. that's changing everything. So our students need a degree in it. Of course, today, a degree in the internet would sound completely ridiculous. And that may be the same way that AI develops. So on the right, we have a few ways of thinking about how AI shows up in our curriculum as opposed to as a degree. So first of all, AI, understanding AI, being an expert or a user of AI is more than just technical learning. It's not really technical. If you've used it to any extent, you know, it's having a conversation. It's not, you're not programming, you're not doing anything technical. It is a set of skills that students today need, and it goes far beyond a technical degree or field. Because it is affecting so many different types of jobs, as we just discussed, it's not about having one degree that only a select number of your students would pursue. It has to be embedded across the curriculum. And it's also more than a set of skills. It is also about reinforcing in our students that ability to think critically and be a lifelong learner and evolve as new things come, because whatever you teach them today is going to be different 3 months out. So this is not a place where we can say, we're going to become experts on AI and teach our students, and then they will be done. It has to be an ability they have to keep learning it as they go. Now, some institutions are sort of taking a middle road there and setting up AI minors or certificates for students who really want to dig in further. And what's interesting is the ways you can see this across different types of fields. So if you look at the course prefixes across this slide, you can see AI-related courses in philosophy, biology, economics, English, geography, lots of different applications and places where folks are finding ways to build AI topics and skills and tools into lots of different disciplines. So whether you do that within a bucket of a certificate or a minor, or you simply think about ways of building it into individual courses throughout every curriculum, you can see that schools are experimenting with this. I think my favorite one on here is AI in antiquity, which I have no idea what they teach in that course, but it sounds pretty interesting to me. So if we think about this question of how this looks across your curriculum, I think we have to think about it on 2 dimensions. So first of all, on that y-axis, changing what we teach. So where do you need to actually teach new content, new ways of thinking, new skills because of how AI is affecting the field you teach? And then across the x-axis, how much do we need to change pedagogically? How are we changing how we are teaching? So just to highlight, and I will say, this is the placement of each of these disciplines is our assessment of what we are seeing. But of course, you could have lots of debate about where each discipline falls on these 2 axes. But just as a few examples of ways of thinking about this, computer science, obviously, the content of the work of computer science is changing immensely as you are teaching these new skills, machine learning, and all the things that underlie LLMs and their functioning. So computer science is a place where you have to change what you teach quite a bit. If you think about English classes, literature, or other, you will really need to think about pedagogy in a really significant way as a result of AI. AI is very good at drafting writing and analyzing texts. So how can you rethink the way that you write your assignments to address this problem and challenge and help students learn those same critical skills to analyze literature and not rely on AI tools? You could also think about the field of communication. So lots of changes in what you might teach about how that work is done, because graduates entering the workforce and doing communications roles are going to be expected to use these tools to do lots of drafting and writing and putting together. You can use this to put together a podcast. You just feed it some documents and it does the podcast for you with automated voices and everything. So there's all kinds of ways that the role of a communications professional will change. And so you have to teach them new things. You'll also have to change how you teach because, again, they could use those tools to do the classroom assignments. So that's just a few examples again, but helpful to sort of differentiate those two elements of how you might need to think about how your teaching changes as a result of these tools. But let's then take it a step further and talk a little bit about what this looks like in your classroom. I would say there are typically 4 ways that faculty feel about what it means to bring AI into the classroom and some ways they might feel reluctant or concerned about it. One is a feeling like if I start engaging with AI, I'm just sort of opening the floodgates. I have to allow all AI all the time. I'm just going clockwise here. Secondly, sometimes folks feel like if I start engaging AI, that means I'm fully supporting AI. I don't get to be critical of AI anymore. I'm just becoming an AI advocate. A third area is that folks typically get stuck at the point of AI detection and really trying to get good at finding who used AI and don't go any further. And then finally, folks are very legitimately concerned that there's a lot to learn about using AI, and they just simply don't have time to take that on and adjust all their courses and teaching for yet one more new initiative and new effort. So I want to talk about a few other ways of thinking about those challenges. First of all, would definitely encourage that engaging with AI need not be you being credulous and a booster and a cheerleader about AI. You should and can be an informed skeptic and help teach your students to be an informed skeptic about AI as well. Again, their employers are going to expect them to know and use these tools, so they need to understand them, but that doesn't mean that they should adopt a wholly positive attitude. There are questions to be asked. It's a developing technology. So we should all be bringing that kind of attitude to the way we engage it. Secondly, as we think about that issue of human detection of cheating or other AI use, we want to find ways to get past the trust issue that we have developing with our students around this and find ways to reinvest in the human interaction piece of that question. Third, we want to think about sort of an adoption spectrum. So it does not need to be no AI or every AI all the time. There can be a spectrum of ways you allow AI to be used in your classroom. And then finally, I wanted to share, as I mentioned before, some resources that you can use to start trying some of these AI tools in your classroom without feeling overwhelmed with the massive level of investment you might need to take on. So let's dig into these one by one. First, this question of your perspective on AI and whether you can be a skeptic. I mentioned a moment ago this issue of trust. We do have a huge challenge right now with trust between students and faculty. We know from student survey data that they are using ChatGPT and other AI tools a lot, and in times when they're not supposed to. And there is a feeling of it just being an acceptable culture among students. It's really shifting the nature of what students do in the classroom and outside the classroom. And that leads faculty, of course, to feel distrustful, to be constantly on the lookout for students doing this kind of thing. That creates, obviously, an environment that you don't want to have with your students. So one of the things we need to do to start to address that is to be open in our discussions of AI. So if we take the approach of trying to bury our heads in the sand and hope for the best or try to root out the cheating and then ignore the rest, it's more difficult to get students to a place where they are thinking about these tools critically. If they're just using them on their own underground, we don't have the opportunity to have this conversation with them about ethical questions, about our concerns, about their growth of their skills, and all the things we might want them to address. So again, if you just look at this quote on the left from Mark Watkins at University of Mississippi, we want to try to encourage both faculty and students together to think about ways that learning about AI helps you be a more critically informed citizen of the present moment in your school, in your workplace, in the society. It doesn't have to mean that you are a booster. Some of the things on the right that this might mean is We need to understand what Gen AI is good at and what it's not good at. There's lots of things it's not good at, and students need to be equipped to understand that. They need lots of conversation and exploration around the ethics of using these tools when it is appropriate. And this isn't just about cheating, but about much, much more about the role of different skills in our society, about the biases that underlie these tools, et cetera. We also need to better understand in discourse with students, what is it about the work that we're assigning them that makes it so easy to do with AI? If we are assigning them lots of work that AI can do really easily, first of all, you can understand why they're asking AI to do it, but we also might ask whether those assignments are teaching them the skills they are going to need in the workplace, because their workplace might also have them simply use AI to do that task. So are there ways we can build assignments that reflect that, that have them use AI for the things they're going to use AI for in the workplace and do other tasks with their own brains that do require human attention? So we want to think about how we can sort of future-proof our classroom assignments and assessments to do both of those things, teach them to use AI where appropriate, and also emphasize assignments that require that human work. So let's talk a little bit more about this question of AI detection. First and foremost, really important to know that when you use AI detection tools, they very often misflag AI use. So they are giving you false positives that really harm your relationship with those students and can sometimes have really negative consequences for students. So we know for one thing that AI detectors much more often flag as AI produced writing by non-native speakers, because the patterns of a non-native speaker tend to be a little more stilted because they're learning the language still, and that is more like how a computer would write. So that's a big concern. And in addition, it's just not good always, these detectors, at figuring this out. So we have an example here on the right of a professor that used an AI detector, told him the entire class had cheated on their papers, and he failed the entire class incorrectly. They hadn't. So these detectors are simply not that good at what they do and can't be relied on to decide who cheated or who didn't. Just to give you one other example, we put a portion of the Declaration of Independence into one of these checkers. It told us there's a 48% chance that AI wrote the Declaration of Independence. I feel pretty confident that's not the case. But that, again, gives you an example of the fact that these cannot check and catch cheating the way you think that they can. But perhaps even more broadly, the use of these checkers reflects a misunderstanding of how students are often using this work. Now, do you have students who simply go to one of these platforms and have it write a paper and try to turn that in? Absolutely. But for many students, the way that they are using these tools is much more complex and is not something that a plagiarism checker or a GPT checker would ever find. So here's how often a student who's a little more savvy is using this tool. They get an assignment, they go to ChatGPT, and they get it to give them 5 possible arguments that they could write their paper about. Now, keep in mind, if you haven't used these tools, they can take your assignment, upload it into ChatGPT. They can give your syllabus also, so ChatGPT knows what you've read and talked about in the class. They could upload class notes. They could give it all kinds of resources and then say to ChatGPT, please give me 5 arguments I could make, 5 thesis statements, whatever, for this paper. Then the student can look through those, decide which one they want to use, and they could say, great, I want to use your second suggestion. Please give me a 5-paragraph outline for this paper to make that argument. I want the supporting claims, I want evidence, I want some conclusions. Then they can take that outline and add their own language and write it out in their own writing and turn that in. They have written their own paper, but done no thought work of their own at all. Your plagiarism detector and your ChatGPT detector would not flag that as having used AI because they're not turning in the outline and all the exchanges they had. They're turning in the thing they wrote with their own words. So if you think that you're using an AI detector to catch the use of AI, you're actually only talking about a small proportion of how students use it. And quite frankly, they're getting more and more sophisticated very, very quickly and doing more like this than they are just asking GPT to write their whole paper. So again, going back to this mistrust, now we're in a place, if we understand that students are doing that sort of thing, that in fact amps up our mistrust, right? We may feel like sort of overwhelmed with the idea of trying to figure out how to know how students are using this and what you're supposed to do about it to make sure that they're actually learning what they're supposed to learn. So I want to share some strategies we see in place at some other institutions for faculty to address this question. So this tool, and you can link off the slide if you want to go look at the full tool online, is from McMaster University. When they have reason to think that a student has cheated, they don't use an AI detector, they use a conversation. So the faculty member sits down with the student and asks them questions like those on the left. And as you can see, the questions are things like just having the student talk about their argument. If a student actually did this work themselves, they should be able to talk about the argument, how they supported it, where they found their examples. If there's some weird phrase in there that they kept using that you think that feels like they wouldn't have come up with that phrase, that feels like ChatGPT wrote it, ask them what that phrase means. If their vocabulary doesn't reflect what they use in class writing, ask them some of those words. If they can have a conversation with you that shows they understood what all this was about, then you can feel confident they did their own work. If you're trying to have this conversation with them and they can't answer your questions and they don't know what the words in their paper mean, you can feel pretty confident that they probably got some help on that paper of one kind or another, and then you can proceed with the conduct process. By having this as a process and a set of questions used across departments across the university, McMaster also avoids bias and helps make sure faculty across different departments are approaching this in the same way. It also, by the way, gives students great practice talking about their work, which they're going to have to do in a professional setting. Now, you could do this kind of thing across the board, but of course, that would take quite a bit of time for the number of students I'm sure you have in your classes. Or you could, as McMaster does, simply use this in cases where misconduct is a concern. Now, the other piece of addressing unethical use, of course, is setting expectations with students and having policies up front about what ways they can and can't use AI. And I know that you've already done some of this work there at Harrisburg. Now, some of the things that you might want to address in the policy include just being clear about when students can and can't use AI tools, identifying in what ways they are allowed to use them. So for example, maybe they can use it to come up with ideas, but they can't use it to write, or they can use it to check their code, but they can't use it to draft the code in the first place, that sort of thing. In addition, talking about whether you expect them to cite or document how they used the tool or not. And folks have different points of view on this. Some folks believe you should always cite and have footnotes and all of that. You know, this was written with the assistance of AI, that sort of thing, or even more specific documentation about how you used AI. Other folks say AI is like a calculator. When you do your math homework, you don't put a footnote that says, I used my calculator on this assignment. It's just a tool that is an expected part of your work. So that's, I think, perspectives they're evolving, but something to consider coming to some expectation with your students about why and how and when you want them to tell you that they used AI. Now, what we don't want is to get to a situation where you as faculty are having to be the AI cops, constantly running around trying to find out who cheated, who used AI, where did they use AI, when. So we really need a structure in place at the institution of rules and expectations about AI that get more specific as you get to a more specific setting. So we need institutional statements about AI that should both present limitations on how it's used, but also give folks permission to use AI where appropriate. So one of the actual barriers we tend to see with student and faculty and staff adoption is folks are not sure if they're going to get in trouble for using AI. So they use it, but they hide their use of it. So you want the institution, to the extent that they feel comfortable, to say, hey, we want you to use AI. This is part of what you're going to do in the workplace. We're excited for you to try it. Here, in that second level, are the ways that we want you to use it and where it's allowable. And here's the guardrails around it. And here are the ways that you should not use it. And then you can get even more specific within your course, either for your course as a whole or even on individual assignments about when and how AI can and cannot be used and should or should not be cited. I'm going to pause for just a second. I see some activity in the chat, so I just want to see if there's anything I need to answer. Yes, Janice noted I will leave some time for questions. So I'm going to, okay, great. So third, I mentioned before, we want to have sort of a spectrum of AI adoption. We need not be banning AI entirely or accepting all AI. There's different ways we can build this into our classrooms. So what does that look like? And what can faculty and should faculty do to put those guardrails around how the tool is used? So if you look at this spectrum, you can see on the left, we have some cases where you might say, no AI on this at all. All the way on the right, you might have full use of AI. You can use it however you want. You don't have to tell me how you used it. You just need to get to the outcome of this assignment. Use whatever tools are at your disposal. But I think more interestingly, we have this range of approaches in the middle that give you ways of putting some guardrails around how students are using AI. And I think what's interesting about these guardrails is a couple of things. One, it helps you think about what your actual goal is in the learning from a particular assignment. What are the skills you actually need them to learn? And what does it not really matter if they use some assistance? But then also, it helps you better replicate what they might be doing in the workplace. So in the workplace, they're going to be expected to use AI to help them come up with ideas before they finalize it into a product that's in the format that their organization wants. And so by giving them different combinations of tasks, you help them get practice with interacting with AI to get the best final product they can. So going from left to right here, maybe you tell them, hey, it's fine to use AI to come up with ideas, to figure out how to structure your paper, that sort of thing, but you can't use any AI in the final product. So you get all those ideas and then you write the paper or you generate the PowerPoint, whatever it might be. In the middle, you can use AI to help you refine what you've done. So you write a draft, you feed it into AI and you ask AI to help you improve it, give you tips, help you edit, etc. But still the final work is your own. You're choosing what changes to make and you're implementing those changes. Now, a really interesting one is the third middle section there, having AI do a task for you and then you analyze its output. Now, this is really helpful to prepare for the workplace in areas where AI is going to do a significant amount of work. So for example, AI now does quite a bit of coding, but human coders and software engineers need to review that code and fix it where AI has gone wrong. So asking students to have AI do a task and then critique it is a great skill to help them both apply what they know about the discipline and its skill set and prepare to do similar types of work in the classroom. So you could make a course that is all in one of these areas, but you could also see how across your course you choose different categories of task along this spectrum for different assignments so that throughout the course or throughout your program that you're part of, students are getting different types of experiences with different ways of building AI into their work and how they balance that with their own human contribution. Now, going a little further into the question of how do we think about what our assignments might look like if we build AI into it in that way. So some of the things on the left that you could think about if you have an assignment that you don't want them to use AI on and you want to sort of AI proof it. Now, I will caveat, AI is constantly evolving and people are constantly getting smarter in how to leverage AI. So the idea of AI proofing an assignment is, I think, somewhat questionable and will get more so. But that said, there are some things that you can do to do that to a point. So if you want to create assignments that are less likely for students to use AI on or harder for students to use AI on, you can build more scaffolding and breaking assignments down into smaller tasks. Now, those still have to be tasks that are hard for AI to do, but it also reduces student incentive to cheat. If it's a small piece of a task, they're less likely to bother with trying to get out of it. You can double down on what I know you already do, which is having assignments that are as authentic as possible with real world case studies, industry applications, all of those things that both provide real value to students to make them feel it's more worth their time to invest in doing it themselves. And it is harder for a GPT to produce. As we discussed with the McMaster example, really investing in metacognition and student reflection on the work. Anytime you have them write some additional analysis or speak in class some additional analysis about how they did their work, what decisions they made, why they chose their topic, any and all of those things, they can't get ChatGPT to do that. And then building in a requirement for them to make connections to things ChatGPT doesn't have ready access to. So recent events, because ChatGPT doesn't have current events, things you've discussed in class that they can't have gotten ChatGPT to know about and hear about, that sort of thing. All of those things can be ways to make it less easy for students to use ChatGPT. If there's an assignment where you really believe students need to do this without the assistance of AI, those are things you can lean into. Now, on the right, on the other hand, if you want to try some AI first assignments, as we might call them, which is those three areas in the middle of the spectrum we just talked about, ways that we encourage students to use AI in some capacity in a given assignment, these are some ways you might think about that. So, for example, you could ask AI to give you a draft of writing or code, or you could ask AI to fact check something, and then students have to look at what AI did. Did AI do a good job with this? Where are the weaknesses? What did AI miss? What did AI get wrong? How would I improve this as a human? You can have students go through the exercise of improving their prompts. This is pretty interesting because if you're not familiar, the prompt is simply the way you ask ChatGPT your question. It feels like a technical skill in some ways because it is how you're using the platform. But in fact, getting better and better and more specific about what you're asking ChatGPT, giving it more parameters, clarifying the way you're asking your question, identifying weaknesses in what it responded, and figuring out a way to ask your question better is simply critical thinking. That is just like a conversation you might have in a classroom or with a student in office hours, having a back and forth to try to get people to think more clearly about what they want and what outputs they need. So that's actually a really great simply thinking exercise, as well as improving students' ability to use these tools. Again, helping students think about prompts that produce the best results from ChatGPT helps them get better at asking questions. And then you can also ask them to use AI in a really applied way. So there's a problem you're trying to address, a local issue. How can you use AI to start to develop proposed solutions, gather input from different sources, et cetera, to sort of get more quickly to a new idea? So if you're doing these kind of assignments with your students, again, you're helping them get ready for the workforce that they're going to be asked to use these tools in this way, and challenging your students to figure out what AI can do and what they as human thinkers do that AI can't, because that's going to be their value in the workplace as we get down the road, as more and more employers are trying to replace human workers, quite frankly, with AI. We all have to lean into being better at the human skills that can't be replaced. And finally, wanted to share, as I said, a few quick resources that you might look at if you want to try to explore this, if you want to try to think about what these assignments might look like in your classroom. So back to McMaster University, this is a really cool tool that they have, and the URL is down at the bottom of the slide. They have this tool called the Assessment Partner. And as you can see, there are drop downs, so you can tell the assessment partner what kind of project you want to create, what's your discipline, how advanced are the students, are they, master students, are they first year freshmen, whatever, and how you want students to use or not use AI in that assignment. And the tool will draft an assignment for you with a grading rubric and everything. So what's pretty interesting about this is, as we've had faculty experiment with this with us, sometimes it creates a great draft assignment that faculty are extremely excited about. You make it your own for, your way of teaching and what you want to emphasize, and you're off and running. It really saved a lot of time creating a new assignment idea. Other times, because of the ways that each discipline has its own language and specific terms for that discipline, sometimes the assessment partner doesn't quite know the terms of that discipline and will misunderstand what you're asking for and just give you something unusable. But that is, of course, the way AI works in general. But I encourage you to play around with this and see what kind of new assignment ideas you might be able to generate with it and how quickly it can give you something to work with. Lots of additional links here of both AI assignments that are already created that you could just by faculty at different institutions that you could just take and apply to your own context, and also some resources for getting to that piece we were just talking about creating assignments that it is harder for students to use AI in if you want to lean into that side. So lots of resources to look through in both of those categories here. And then finally, we have a toolkit on our website. If you do not have a login to our website, anyone at a partner institution can have one. So you just need to sign up with your school email address and you'll be able to access this. But this gives you some sample checklists for what your AI policies might look like in your syllabus and in your course assignments. Gives you some sample assignments in addition to those ones you can access on the previous page, and also some prompt repositories. If you're interested in getting some prompts that other people have already tried and had success with that you and your students might want to use in assignments and activities, they're in that toolkit as well. So with that, let me stop and see if there are any questions.
If you have any questions and you are in the room, please come down to the stand mics in the front and pose your question. For context, please give the speaker your name and discipline so she can understand where your question is coming from. And I'm back here monitoring the chat.
Dr. Moore, can I just begin? Okay. One of the questions that I have that concerns me is, in the past academic year, I believe it was Northwestern University, a student levied a lawsuit against the university because the professor was making an abundant use of AI-generated content in their classroom, and that is something that gives me pause for using it in our classroom because our students do pay for the expertise of the professors who went to school for a tremendously long time to be able to pass that information on to their students. The alternative argument from the student being, I'm not paying tuition for something that I can just put into ChatGPT on my own. So I'm curious as to what the stance is of hack on this issue and what the guidance is for faculty, because I think that student who did levy that lawsuit does have a fair argument.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously can't speak to Hack's point of view on this, but maybe Dr. Moore would like to. But I would say in general, this is actually just the issue of student cheating on its head, right? We are all wanting to know that whatever engagement, human interaction we are paying for is actually human interaction and not something that we could have just produced ourselves on ChatGPT. So I would say, just as you want to see that your students used their own human minds to deal with whatever elements they produced from AI, faculty should be able to show that the way they used AI was as a tool, just like searching for documents in a library database, right? You're pulling resources and information and you're using your expertise to interpret, organize, and present that information to students. So would a student have a valid complaint if you just went to ChatGPT, had ChatGPT write a lecture for you, you delivered the lecture with no additional thought? Yes. But if you use ChatGPT to digest all your notes and help you organize the lecture better, or help you come up with a new example for one area you don't think students understand as well usually, that is to the student's benefit, and you're leveraging a tool to enhance your expertise, not replace your expertise. You couldn't have produced the result without the expertise you as a human brought. So that's how I would answer that student complaint. Same thing with, there's been some lawsuits about students complaining that faculty are using AI to grade their work. Same thing there. Grading is supposed to be you using your expertise to guide the student and give them feedback. If it is rote feedback, like checking off multiple choice questions or correcting basic grammar, that can be done by a tool. But most of the feedback you should be giving students is based on your expertise and your understanding of that student and their context. So it shouldn't be replaceable. And you should be able to show why the thing you offered is different from what AI could do.
Megan, I will have Dr. Griswold follow up in writing to faculty on hack stance. Just because of the limited time we have, I want the others to be able to answer their questions. Thank you. Okay.
Hi there. My name is Daryl Hall. I teach sociology. I'm interested in what your thoughts are in using the document's metadata to detect plagiarism and AI-generated work. I had a student this summer who turned in an 18-page paper and spent 0 minutes on it, according to the metadata. And so I wanted to meet with her to discuss her work on a one-to-one basis to see what her process was for creating drafts and so on. And she said, "Oh, here, let me send you those drafts." And so she sent me a draft and an outline, and that metadata showed that she created it after the assignment was due. I think that the AI detection in conjunction with the metadata works very well to suss out these issues.
Yeah, so hello, I'm also a sociologist, so always happy to meet others. I think that you're right that in some cases you can catch students doing that kind of stuff. My fear is that you are also going to get a lot of false positives that you don't want to get. And also, it is the case that there's ways in which the metadata may not be correct if they are doing their drafting by hand, if they're, there's all sorts of explanations they can offer. And yes, you can ask for further documentation, but I would say, going back to that example from McMaster University, what kind of conversation do you prefer to have with a student? Do you prefer to have a sort of criminal investigation type of conversation with the student? Or do you prefer to talk to them about the topic of their paper? Because again, they won't be able to meaningfully discuss how they came to that idea, what other ideas they discarded earlier, what this phrase means, etc., if they didn't do the work. And so why not have that conversation and save yourself the metadata searching and all of that, which has other risks?
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Gonzalez, and I teach medical assisting and allied health courses. I have a very simple question. Could you go back on the slide where you have resources?
Mm-hmm. This one?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. And you will get these in, that was a very simple question, but you will also get the slides in follow-up, so you can click the links.
Yeah, I was assuming we'd be getting the slides.
Absolutely.
I'm Peggy McGuire. I teach writing, so different from other people. So I'm way back when you were talking about augmentation, which I found like really interesting. And what hit me as you were talking was I'm thinking about how we incorporate research and data analysis, I hope, into even the most basic 101 composition class. You know, we're supposed to be trying to start that process and continue that process. And especially, I love teaching 102, which is basically argument, because that's when you really have to drill down and get people thinking or not. So I guess my question was, are there particular strategies or tools around that help people use this is the first time I've ever thought about actually using it as opposing to catching it. So this is exciting for me. But is there a way to help people do better research without, and then I worried, oh my God, what happens to librarians? I don't want them to lose their jobs of helping my students. But are there strategies and tools that actually help people improve their ability to do appropriate research and then analyze the data that they get from that research, all with the goal of defending a thesis? So
Absolutely. And you'll see some of those things in this list of resources. I think I would say, I know we're running low on time, but that is what students are going to have to do in the workplace. And if you all, again, put yourselves back 15 or 20 years, our big challenge was to explain to students why everything they saw on the internet wasn't true and that they had to check it, right? It's the same with AI. If students go to a chatbot or to ChatGPT and ask it to do research for them, and they don't interrogate its sources and say back to ChatGPT, what sources did you use to generate that conclusion? And then look themselves at the sources to see if ChatGPT came to the right conclusion or missed other sources or follow the trail. That's the skill we need to be teaching them, because that's what they have to do in the workplace. They need to use ChatGPT to get a running start and then do lots of critical thinking work to see whether what it produced was good.
Okay, so doing it, but interrogating it as well. Cool, thank you.
Jennifer, we have some additional questions in the chat, but we are out of time, and I don't want to take away from our internal discussion. I'd like to follow up with you on the questions and share them back out with the group. Some have to do with assistive technology, cognitive performance, and the case for a strong liberal arts education. I'd love to follow up and make sure the individuals on Zoom are heard as well. I want to thank you for being with us today. I think it posed some thoughtful insights that we will take with us throughout the academic year and into our next session, which is an internal conversation about AI and where we are at as an organization. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And this presentation is being recorded. It will be chunked and placed into Cornerstone, and I will follow up with the actual slides for you so you have those resources at hand.